When life pushes you to the edge, sometimes the greatest victories come from standing your ground. Maya's journey from eviction to empowerment is a powerful reminder that no one is ever truly powerless. Sometimes, all it takes is the courage to fight back. Maya was the kind of woman who carried the weight of the world with quiet grace. A single mom in her early 30s, she worked tirelessly as a nurse at the local hospital. Her days were long, filled with double shifts and countless sacrifices, all for her 7-year-old son, Jaden. He was her whole world, a bright-eyed boy with a love for drawing superheroes and dreaming big. They lived in a small but cozy apartment in a worn-down building on Maple Street. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. The walls were adorned with Jaden's colorful crayon drawings, and the kitchen always smelled faintly of the pancakes Maya made every Saturday morning. To Maya, the apartment was a place of safety and love, a refuge from the chaos of the outside world. But the building's landlord, Mr. Preston, was a constant source of tension. A tall man with sharp suits and a sharper tongue, he seemed to delight in making life difficult for tenants like Maya. Mr. Preston was wealthy and condescending, the kind of man who looked down on anyone who didn't fit his vision of success. He had a reputation for finding ways to push out tenants he deemed undesirable, and his disdain for Maya was thinly veiled. She'd caught his sneering glances in the hallway and endured his curt, dismissive tone during their rare interactions. For years, Maya had done her best to stay under his radar. But deep down, she knew it was only a matter of time before Mr. Preston's prejudice turned into something more. And when the dreaded eviction notice finally arrived, it shattered the fragile peace she had worked so hard to build. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Maya had just come home from another exhausting shift at the hospital, her scrubs still wrinkled, and Jaden was busy at the kitchen table, coloring another superhero masterpiece. She had barely set her bag down when a loud knock at the door interrupted the quiet hum of their routine. Standing there was Mr. Preston, his cold gray eyes scanning the apartment as though he were already deciding what to do with the space once Maya was gone. Without a smile or a word of greeting, he handed her a crisp, white envelope. "This is for you," he said curtly, before turning on his polished heels and disappearing down the hallway. Maya opened the envelope with trembling hands, her heart sinking as she read the bold print at the top. Notice of eviction. The letter was short and vague, claiming the building needed extensive improvements, and that tenants in certain units, hers included, had 30 days to vacate. Her stomach churned as she reread the letter, anger and disbelief boiling beneath her exhaustion. Improvements? There hadn't been a single renovation in the building since she'd moved in. The creaky stairs, flickering hallway lights, and leaky faucets told that story well enough. But Maya wasn't naive. She knew what this was really about. It wasn't the state of the building, it was her. Mr. Preston had always looked at her like she didn't belong, like she was a blemish on his property. She could almost hear his voice echoing in her head. "People like you don't fit the image of this place." Tears threatened to spill, but Maya blinked them back, determined not to let Jaden see her crumble. She glanced over at her son, who was happily drawing without a care in the world. For his sake, she had to stay strong. As much as it hurt, she wasn't shocked. She'd faced subtle slights and outright prejudice before. On the bus, at the grocery store, even at work. But this? Being forced out of her home? It was a new kind of injustice, one she wasn't sure she could fight. Clutching the notice, Maya sank into the worn armchair by the window. Her mind raced with questions. Where would they go? How could she afford to move on such short notice? And most importantly, how could someone like Mr. Preston have so much power to uproot lives without a second thought? But as she sat there, staring at Jaden's bright smile and the walls filled with his drawings, something stirred inside her. A quiet resolve. She didn't know how yet, but she wouldn't let Mr. Preston win. Not this time. The days after receiving the eviction notice were a whirlwind of emotions for Maya. Devastation, anger, fear. They all tangled together, making it hard to think clearly. She tried to keep up her usual routine for Jaden's sake, but the weight of their uncertain future pressed heavily on her every waking moment. In the quiet moments after putting Jaden to bed, Maya found herself staring at the eviction notice on the kitchen table. It felt like a cruel reminder of how fragile her stability had always been. This apartment wasn't much, but it was their home. She had worked so hard to afford it. Grueling double shifts, sleepless nights, and weekends spent poring over bills. Every dollar she'd earned had been carefully stretched to cover rent, food, and the occasional treat for Jaden, like his favorite superhero coloring books. Maya's mind raced with the sacrifices she'd made since moving here. She thought about the times she'd skipped meals so Jaden could have a proper lunch, the countless hours spent commuting to save on daycare costs, and the holidays she'd worked to earn a little extra overtime pay. Losing this apartment wasn't just about losing a place to live. It felt like losing a piece of everything she'd fought for. Her neighbors offered kind words and sympathetic glances when she shared the news, but Maya could tell they were just as scared. Many of them had dealt with Mr. Preston's underhanded tactics before. One neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, shook her head, sadly. "I'm so sorry, Mia," she said. "That man only cares about money. He's been trying to push people like us out for years." Another tenant, Mr. Harris, chimed in. "We've complained before, but it never goes anywhere. He's got connections. People like him always do." Their words only deepened Maya's sense of helplessness. It seemed like Mr. Preston's power was untouchable, and the system was stacked against people like her. Each passing day felt like a countdown to disaster. She scoured rental listings during her breaks at work, but everything was either too expensive or too far away. The thought of uprooting Jaden from his school and the little life they'd built made her heart ache. Still, Maya refused to give in completely to despair. She put on a brave face for Jaden, helping him with homework and listening to his excited stories about his latest superhero creation. But late at night, when the apartment was silent, the tears would come. She felt trapped in a situation she couldn't control, fighting against a man who held all the cards. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope remained. A faint belief that somehow, she would find a way to protect her son and their future. Desperation pushed Maya to reach out to someone she hadn't spoken to in years, her old college friend, Lisa. They had drifted apart over time, but Maya remembered that Lisa had gone on to become a real estate lawyer. If anyone could help her make sense of this situation, it was Lisa. They met at a small cafe near Lisa's office. Maya arrived early, nervously clutching the eviction notice, her mind swimming with questions and fears. When Lisa walked in, her warm smile and reassuring presence brought a small sense of relief. After catching up briefly, Maya laid the eviction notice on the table. "I don't know what to do, Lisa," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "I feel like he's just doing this to get rid of me, but I don't have the time or money to fight it." Lisa studied the notice carefully, her expression turning serious. "This doesn't sit right with me," she said, shaking her head. Evicting tenants for vague improvements is a common tactic, especially for landlords trying to drive people out. But proving discrimination is tricky. Even if we file a complaint, it could take months, maybe longer, to get through the system. Maya's heart sank. "Months? I only have 30 days, Lisa. I can't wait that long." Lisa reached across the table and placed a comforting hand on Maya's. "I know it feels hopeless, but let's not give up just yet. There might be another way." She paused, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "You know, I've heard something interesting about this building recently. Word on the grapevine is that Mr. Preston's in financial trouble. Apparently he's trying to sell the building quietly, probably to avoid showing weakness." Maya blinked, caught off guard. "Sell the building? Why would he do that?" "From what I've heard, he's been bleeding money. Bad investments, legal fees, you name it. He probably wants to offload the building before things get worse," Lisa explained. A flicker of hope lit up inside Maya. She didn't know what this information could mean for her yet, but it felt like a crack in the wall Mr. Preston had built around her. "Do you think there's anything I can do with that?" she asked cautiously. Lisa leaned back in her chair, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Maybe, but if you want to fight this, we'll need to be smart about it. Let me dig into this a bit more and I'll see what I can find." For the first time in days, Maya left the cafe feeling something she hadn't felt since receiving the eviction notice, a glimmer of hope. Mr. Preston wasn't invincible, and maybe, just maybe, there was a way to turn the tables on him. That evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table, staring at the eviction notice once again. But this time, her thoughts were different. Lisa's words replayed in her mind. Mr. Preston was selling the building. It felt like a sliver of opportunity, though she wasn't sure how to seize it. She picked up her phone and hesitated before dialing. Her brother, Marcus, had always been her rock, the one person she could turn to no matter what. He was a self-made entrepreneur, running a small but thriving business. While she hated the idea of burdening him with her problems, she knew she couldn't navigate this alone. When Marcus picked up, his warm, familiar voice immediately eased some of her tension. Hey Maya, everything okay? Maya took a deep breath. Not really, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I got an eviction notice. The landlord says it's for improvements, but I think it's just his way of pushing me out. There was a pause on the other end, then Marcus's voice turned firm. That's ridiculous. He can't just do that. Have you looked into your options? I talked to Lisa. Remember her from college? She's a real estate lawyer now. She said fighting it legally could take too long. But she also told me something else. Mr. Preston is trying to sell the building. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Selling the building? Why? Financial trouble, apparently, Maya said. I don't know all the details, but he's trying to offload it quietly. There was a thoughtful silence before Marcus spoke again, his tone sharper, more focused. Maya, this could be your chance. My chance for what? She asked, confused. To buy the building, Marcus said plainly. Maya's breath caught. Buy the building? Marcus, I'm barely making ends meet. How could I possibly do that? Listen to me, Marcus said, his voice steady and reassuring. I know it sounds crazy, but think about it. If Preston's in trouble, he might sell it for less than it's worth. You wouldn't just be saving your home, you'd be protecting the other tenants from him too. But where would I even get the money? Maya asked, overwhelmed by the thought. That's where I come in. Marcus said with a grin she could hear through the phone. You've always supported me, Maya, even when no one else believed in me. Let me do the same for you. I've got some savings and a good credit line. We can do this together. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes. Marcus, I can't let you risk everything for me. You're not letting me do anything, he replied firmly. You're my sister, and I believe in you. This isn't just about you or Jaden. This is about taking back control from people like Preston. You've fought for everything you've got. Now it's time to fight for something bigger. Maya sat in silence, letting his words sink in. The idea was terrifying, but for the first time in days, it also felt like there was a way out. A way not just to save her home, but to stand up to the injustice she'd been forced to endure. Okay, she said finally, her voice shaking but determined. Let's do it. Now that's the Maya I know, Marcus said, his pride unmistakable. We'll figure this out, step by step, and when it's over, Preston won't know what hit him. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt something close to hope. She wasn't alone in this fight. And now, she had a plan. The weeks that followed were some of the most nerve-wracking of Maya's life. With Marcus by her side, she dove headfirst into the complicated process of buying the building. It felt surreal, a single mom and a nurse, suddenly stepping into the world of real estate. But Marcus had a plan, and his confidence gave her strength. First rule, Marcus said one night as they sat at his dining table, documents and laptops spread around them. We keep our names out of this. If Preston finds out it's you, he might try to block the deal out of spite. How do we even do that? Maya asked, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the task. I'll handle that part, Marcus assured her. We'll work through a trust I set up. He'll think it's just another buyer looking for an investment. No need for him to know who's really pulling the strings. Despite Marcus's confidence, Maya couldn't help but feel moments of doubt. Late at night, when the world was quiet, her mind raced with fears. What if they couldn't close the deal? What if Preston found out and ruined everything? What if she was taking on more than she could handle? But each time the doubts crept in, she thought of Jaden. She pictured his smiling face as he played in the living room, his drawings pinned to the walls of their apartment. This wasn't just about beating Preston, it was about giving her son the stability and security he deserved. As the process moved forward, there were countless meetings with lawyers, realtors, and bankers. Maya felt out of her depth at times, but Marcus was there every step of the way, patiently explaining each detail and reminding her why they were doing this. Finally, the day came when all the papers were signed and the deal was done. The building was theirs. Maya couldn't believe it. She sat in stunned silence in Marcus's office, the final contract in her hands. "Congratulations," Marcus said with a grin. "You're officially a landlord." Maya let out a shaky laugh. "I can't believe we did it." "We did," Marcus said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And now, it's time to show Preston exactly who he's been messing with." Maya felt a surge of pride and determination. She had faced her fears and taken the boldest leap of her life. The building wasn't just a home anymore. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for. And now it was hers. The day of the reveal was one Maya would never forget. She had waited for this moment, rehearsing what she would say to Mr. Preston over and over in her mind. Now, standing outside his pristine office door, her heart raced, but her resolve was firm. Dressed in her favorite blazer and carrying a copy of the signed ownership documents, she knocked. "Come in," came Mr. Preston's sharp voice. As Maya stepped inside, his eyes flicked up from the papers on his desk, narrowing slightly as he recognized her. "Miss Williams," he said coolly, "what can I do for you? If you're here about the eviction, my hands are tied. The process is already in motion." Maya smiled, calm and composed. "Actually, Mr. Preston, I'm here about something else entirely." She placed the documents on his desk with deliberate care. "You might want to take a look at these." Mr. Preston's brow furrowed as he picked up the papers. At first, he seemed confused, but as he read further, his face shifted, from confusion to shock, then to disbelief. He looked up at her, his mouth slightly open. This can't be right," he stammered. "This says the building has been sold." "That's correct," Maya said evenly, her voice steady. "You no longer own it." "But who?" he demanded, his tone rising. "Who bought it?" Maya straightened, meeting his gaze with unwavering confidence. "I did." The room went silent, the air thick with tension. For a moment it seemed as though Mr. Preston couldn't process what he'd just heard. "You," he finally said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "How? That's impossible." "It's not impossible," Maya replied, her calm demeanor unwavering. "I had help from someone who believes in me. And now, this building belongs to me. Which means your eviction notices? They're no longer valid." Mr. Preston's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. He opened his mouth to argue, but seemed at a loss for words. Maya leaned forward slightly, her tone firm but measured. "For years, you've looked down on people like me. Working mothers, people of color, tenants just trying to make a life for themselves. You thought you could force me out of my home, but instead, I'm here to tell you that I'm not going anywhere. Neither are the other tenants you've been trying to intimidate." Mr. Preston sputtered, his composure unraveling. This is outrageous," he exclaimed. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "I know exactly what I'm doing," Maya said, standing tall. "I'm taking back control. For myself, for my son, and for everyone you've mistreated. And as the new owner of this building, I suggest you find the door." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Preston's face was a mix of humiliation and defeat. Without another word, Maya turned and walked out of the office, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and triumph. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, the weight of the moment hit her. She had faced her fears, stood up to injustice, and won. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya breathed deeply, knowing that her home and her future were finally secure. The next morning, Maya stood in the building's small courtyard, her heart pounding with anticipation. Word had spread quickly among the tenants that there was going to be an important announcement. Many of them had gathered, curiosity and apprehension written on their faces. For years they'd lived under Mr. Preston's thumb, bracing themselves for whatever scheme he might pull next. Maya took a deep breath and stepped forward, clutching a folder filled with her plans. She looked out at the crowd, Mrs. Delgado, who had lived in the building for decades, Mr. Harris, who was always fixing something for the neighbors, and others who had become like an extended family. Jaden stood at her side, beaming with pride. "I wanted to thank you all for coming," Maya began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know the past few weeks have been stressful, and I know how hard it's been living under someone who made us feel like we didn't belong. But today, I have good news. Mr. Preston no longer owns this building." Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by murmurs of disbelief. Maya smiled, holding up her folder. "As of yesterday, I am the new owner of this building." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Mrs. Delgado broke into applause, and soon the entire courtyard erupted in cheers and clapping. Maya felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. "I know what it's like to feel powerless," Maya continued once the excitement died down. "To feel like you don't have a voice. But that ends today. I promise you this. No one in this building will ever have to live in fear of unfair treatment again." She glanced at the worn brick walls and the cracked pavement beneath their feet. "I've lived here long enough to know what needs fixing. This building deserves better, and so do all of you. I've already started working on plans to make improvements. New lighting in the hallways, better plumbing, safer stairwells. But I'm also committed to keeping rents affordable. This is our home, and I want to make it a place where we can all thrive." A wave of gratitude spread across the crowd. Mrs. Delgado stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Maya," she said, her voice trembling. "You've given us something I thought we'd lost, a reason to hope." Maya nodded, her own eyes glistening. "We're in this together. This building isn't just bricks and mortar, it's a community, and I promise to do everything I can to make it a place we're all proud to call home." As the crowd dispersed, Maya felt a sense of fulfillment she'd never known before. She had fought for her home, for her son, and for her neighbors, and now she was ready to build something lasting and beautiful. Maya knew her journey as a building owner wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about rebuilding trust and creating a community rooted in fairness and respect. To make this vision a reality, she needed someone experienced to help her manage the property, someone who shared her values and understood the importance of treating people with dignity. After careful consideration, Maya hired Miss Evelyn Carter, a seasoned property manager with a stellar reputation for promoting fairness and fostering inclusivity. Evelyn was known for her no-nonsense approach to property management, but also for her compassionate leadership and commitment to protecting tenants' rights. On Evelyn's first day, Maya accompanied her to the building to meet the tenants and discuss plans for the future. Word had spread quickly, and the tenants greeted Evelyn warmly. Her open, approachable demeanor immediately put everyone at ease, and her experience shone through as she listened to their concerns and ideas for improvement. Later that afternoon, Maya and Evelyn scheduled a meeting with Mr. Preston to finalize the transfer of property management. Maya insisted on being there, not to gloat, but to ensure he understood that his era of control was over. When Mr. Preston arrived at the building, his face was a mix of bitterness and forced politeness. He walked into the lobby, clearly uncomfortable being in a place he no longer controlled. "So what is this about?" he asked curtly, eyeing Evelyn suspiciously. Maya stepped forward, calm and composed. "Mr. Preston, I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Evelyn Carter, the new property manager for the building. She'll be overseeing all operations from now on." Evelyn extended her hand with a professional smile. "Mr. Preston, I've reviewed the state of the building, and I must say, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm committed to making this a welcoming and fair place for all tenants." Mr. Preston hesitated, his expression hardening as he realized what this meant. "You hired someone?" he sneered, turning to Maya. "Don't tell me you think you're running some kind of charity." Maya's voice was steady but firm. "This isn't charity, Mr. Preston. It's accountability. For too long, you treated this building and the people in it as if they didn't matter. That stops now. Evelyn will make sure of it." Evelyn added, her tone razor sharp. "And rest assured, Mr. Preston, your practices will have no place here going forward. We'll be implementing new policies to protect tenants' rights and promote a healthy, diverse community." Mr. Preston's face turned red, a mix of anger and humiliation. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, he simply glared at Maya, his frustration palpable. Maya met his gaze, unflinching. "You're free to leave now, Mr. Preston. Your chapter here is officially over." Without another word, Mr. Preston stormed out of the building, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. For Maya, it was a moment of quiet triumph, not just for herself, but for everyone who had endured his reign. With Evelyn at the helm, Maya knew the building was in capable hands. She could focus on her role as a leader and a mother, confident that the community she loved was finally in a place of fairness, respect, and hope. As the days turned into weeks, Maya settled into her new role as the proud owner of the building. The renovations were slowly taking shape, and with Evelyn's guidance, things were improving every day. The once neglected hallways were being repainted, the plumbing fixed, and new security features were installed. But it wasn't just the physical changes that mattered. It was the sense of belonging and hope that was taking root among the tenants. Maya often stood in the lobby, chatting with her neighbors, listening to their stories, and sharing her own. It wasn't just about managing the building, it was about building relationships, fostering a sense of community. She had done what she set out to do. She had taken back control, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been pushed aside by Mr. Preston. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Maya returned home to her apartment. Jaden was sitting on the floor, surrounded by his toys, his laughter echoing through the space. It was a simple moment, but it filled Maya's heart with more joy than she could have ever imagined. She walked over and sat beside him, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "Hey buddy, how was your day?" she asked, her voice full of warmth. Jaden looked up at her with his big, bright eyes and smiled. "I made a new drawing, Mommy. It's our home." He handed her a colorful picture of their apartment, with stick figures of them both inside, smiling. Maya's heart swelled with love as she took the drawing in her hands. "It's beautiful, Jaden," she said, brushing a kiss against his forehead. "This is our home, and it's gonna stay that way." As they sat there together, Maya reflected on everything she had been through. The eviction notice, the doubts, the fear. It had all felt so overwhelming, but now in this moment, she could feel the weight lifting. She had faced her fears and fought for what she believed in, and in the process, she had secured a better future for herself, for Jaden, and for all the people who had been a part of this journey. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights twinkled outside their window, Maya stood at the kitchen counter, preparing dinner. The scent of her favorite dish filled the apartment, a reminder that home wasn't just about the walls around her. It was about the love, the community, and the unwavering support of the people who cared for her. Jaden ran over and hugged her tightly around the legs. "Can we celebrate?" he asked excitedly. "You're the best mommy ever." Maya smiled down at him, her heart full. "We are celebrating, baby, every day, together." As they sat down to eat their meal, Maya felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they were building. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but with the support of her family, the strength of her community, and her own determination, she was ready for whatever came next. This was just the beginning, a new chapter, full of possibility, hope, and a brighter future for them both. Feeling inspired by Maya's story? Share it with someone who needs a reminder that they have the strength to change their situation. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to StoryTeller Max and Shelly for more stories that'll move, motivate, and inspire you. Together, we can make a difference. One story at a time.